The sun was just beginning to rise over the endless plains of the American Southwest. Its golden light stretched across the tall grasses and the dusty earth, painting the world in shades of orange and yellow. The wind whispered softly through the land, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and wildflowers. Amid this vast and quiet landscape, a young Apache woman rode her horse with skill and confidence. Her name was Ailn, and she was known not only for her beauty, but also for her courage and intelligence. She had grown up learning to ride horses almost as soon as she could walk, and she moved with a natural grace that made her seem almost one with her horse. Ailn was not just riding for pleasure that morning. She carried an important message for her tribe. Her people were scattered across small settlements, and it was common for young riders like her to deliver news, warnings, or instructions. She took her responsibility seriously. Her horse, a strong and loyal chestnut mare named Luma, had been trained for such journeys. Luma knew the trails well, and the bond between them was strong. As they moved across the plains, Ailn felt the freedom that came from being in the open, surrounded by nature with nothing but the wind and the sound of hooves beneath her. The plains were breathtaking, but they were also dangerous. The land could change quickly, with sudden dips, hidden rocks, and uneven ground that could easily trip a horse. Ailn had learned to pay attention to every detail, every sound, every movement. Still, as much as she was careful, the wild always held surprises. Today, she felt a quiet sense of calm, perhaps too calm. The sun was warm on her back, and the world seemed peaceful. She allowed herself to enjoy the moment, breathing deeply, feeling the rhythm of Luma's gait, and thinking about the small village she needed to reach by midday. Ailn was young, maybe in her late teens, but she had a maturity beyond her years. She had seen hardships in her life, losses that made her stronger, and she carried herself with a quiet determination. Her long black hair flowed behind her, catching the sunlight like strands of silk. She wore simple clothes suited for travel, a soft leather tunic, leggings that allowed her to move freely, and boots that protected her feet. She had a small bag tied to her saddle, carrying the message for her people, some dried food and a water skin. She did not travel with anyone because she was known for being responsible and capable, but today, being alone would soon test her in ways she had never imagined. The land stretched on endlessly in all directions. To the east, the sun rose over distant hills, casting long shadows that seemed to dance on the ground. To the west, the plains extended as far as the eye could see, interrupted only by the occasional tree or rocky outcrop. Birds called to one another in the sky, and the occasional rabbit darted across the path. Ailn felt a deep connection to this land. It was both beautiful and harsh, requiring respect, patience, and understanding. She knew that life here demanded strength, but it also offered moments of breathtaking wonder, like the one she was experiencing now. As she rode, she thought about her tribe, about the families and friends she would soon see. She thought about her younger siblings, who admired her courage and skill. She thought about the elders who had entrusted her with this important task. Her mind wandered for a moment to her dreams and hopes. She wanted to learn more about the world beyond the plains, to travel and see new lands, but she also knew that her responsibilities came first. She had a duty to her people, and she carried that duty with pride. Luma moved steadily, stepping carefully over small rocks and patches of uneven ground. Ailn's hands rested lightly on the reins, guiding her horse with gentle commands. The wind tugged at her hair and her tunic, and she felt alive, fully present in this moment. She noticed small details, the way the sun reflected on a patch of morning dew, the pattern of clouds in the sky, the faint sound of water in the distance. These things reminded her that the world was full of both beauty and danger, and that every journey, no matter how routine, could hold surprises. Suddenly, the calm of the morning was broken by a small misstep. Luma stumbled slightly, catching herself quickly. Ailn's heart skipped a beat, but she corrected her balance and whispered soothing words to her horse. Luma was strong and sure-footed, but even the best horses could be startled or lose their footing. Ailn's careful eyes scanned the ground ahead. She spotted a patch of loose stones near a small dip in the land. The plains were beautiful, but their beauty hid risks. She urged Luma to slow down, wanting to approach the rough patch more carefully. For a moment, everything seemed fine again. Luma adjusted her steps and moved carefully over the uneven ground. Ailn felt a sense of relief and allowed herself to relax slightly. But then, just as quickly as it had come, disaster struck. Luma's hoof caught on a hidden rock and she stumbled violently. Aeon tried to hold on, but the sudden movement threw her from the saddle. She felt herself flying through the air, her body twisting uncontrollably. The world seemed to tilt and spin around her, and then she hit the hard ground with a force that knocked the breath from her lungs. Pain shot through her leg, sharp and unbearable. Aeon lay on the ground, stunned. Luma had managed to stop herself nearby, whinnying softly as if to check on her rider. The wind whooshed past her ears, and the golden light of the morning seemed to blur around her. She tried to move, but the pain in her leg was too strong. She realized immediately that something was seriously wrong. She could not put weight on her leg, and even small movements sent waves of agony through her body. Fear began to creep in. She was alone, far from her village, with no one to help her. The plains, which had moments ago seemed peaceful and inviting, now felt enormous and empty. Every direction looked the same, stretching endlessly with no sign of anyone who could come to her aid. She tried to call out, her voice hoarse from the shock, but her words seemed to vanish into the wind. She realized that her survival depended entirely on her own resourcefulness, or on the chance that someone else might pass by. She drew a shaky breath, trying to calm herself. Panic would make her weaker. She needed to think clearly. Aeon assessed her situation. She could see a small rise not far from where she lay, and beyond that, a trail that might lead to a settlement. But the distance was too great for her injured leg. She would have to find another solution. The thought of waiting alone, vulnerable, on the vast plains was frightening, but she knew that giving in to fear would do her no good. She began to consider how she might attract help or at least make herself more visible. She thought about using pieces of her clothing to signal or waving her arms, but the vastness of the land made it uncertain whether anyone would notice. Time passed slowly. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the warmth of the day began to bake the plains. Aeon's mind wandered, thinking about her family, her tribe, and the life she had known. Memories of her childhood, of her first rides, of laughter with her siblings, filled her mind. She clung to these memories, drawing strength from them. She reminded herself that she had survived challenges before, and she could survive this too. But she also knew she could not do it alone forever. She needed help, and she could only hope that someone might come. As the hours stretched on, Aeon's hope began to waver. She tried to shift slightly to ease the pain, but every movement sent sharp jolts through her body. She felt the sun on her back, the wind in her hair, and the earth beneath her, all familiar, yet suddenly threatening. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining herself back home, surrounded by her people, safe and cared for. That small mental escape gave her a bit of comfort, but the reality remained. She was alone, hurt, and in a dangerous situation. And yet, even in this moment of fear and uncertainty, Aeon's spirit did not break. She had always been strong, and she refused to give up. She whispered quietly to herself, words of encouragement and determination, reminding herself that she could survive. Somewhere out there, someone might notice her. Somewhere, someone might come to help. She held on to that hope tightly, refusing to let despair take over. The plains were wide and lonely, but they had also taught her resilience. She would need that resilience now more than ever. Aeon lay on the hot, dusty ground, her leg throbbing with pain that seemed to spread with every heartbeat. She could barely move it without feeling waves of sharp agony shooting through her body. The sun was higher now, glaring down from the bright blue sky, making the plains seem even more endless. Her throat was dry, and she realized she hadn't taken a drink in a while. Her water skin had rolled a short distance away during her fall, just out of reach. She reached for it as best she could, stretching her arms, but the pain in her leg made it impossible. Frustration bubbled inside her. She had always considered herself careful, alert, and strong, yet here she was, completely helpless. Hours passed slowly. The wind, which had once felt soothing, now seemed harsh, stirring dust and grit around her face. She tried to call out, her voice hoarse and weak, but there was no response. She thought of passing travelers, nearby villagers, or even a wandering hunter who might notice her. But the plains were vast and empty. She began to worry that she might not be seen in time. The fear crept in again like a cold shadow, settling over her thoughts. She forced herself to breathe deeply and remain calm. Panic could only make her weaker. Aeon thought about her horse, Luma. The mare had stopped nearby, tossing her head and whinnying softly as if trying to encourage her. She had always trusted Luma completely, but now she realized that trust could only go so far. Luma couldn't carry her to safety because Aeon's leg was broken. She would have to wait and hope that someone noticed her. The mare's gentle presence, however, gave her a small sense of comfort. Even though she was alone, she was not entirely without company. As the sun climbed higher, Aeon's mind wandered to her family and her tribe. She imagined her mother and father, the elders, and her younger siblings. Her thoughts drifted to the small village she had hoped to reach that morning. How worried would they be when she did arrive? The realization that she might be leaving them anxious and unsure weighed heavily on her heart. She wished she could warn them, reassure them, or even just be with them for a few more hours. The isolation of the plains pressed on her, making her feel small and fragile in a world that was so vast and untamed. Despite her pain, Aeon's spirit refused to give in. She began to think of ways she could signal for help. She looked around for stones or sticks that might create a noticeable shape on the ground. Perhaps she could make a cross or a line to attract attention from someone who might be passing. She tried moving slowly, careful not to strain her leg too much, but each movement caused sharp jolts of pain. Her hands trembled as she arranged a few small sticks, but she soon realized it would be nearly impossible to make a signal that could be seen from a distance. The vastness of the plains seemed to swallow her efforts. Time continued to drag. The sun climbed higher and then slowly began to descend, casting long shadows across the rolling land. Aeon's energy was fading. Hunger and thirst gnawed at her, and the pain in her leg made every breath feel heavy. She tried to distract herself by observing the plains, looking for any sign of life, birds, insects, or distant animals that could reassure her that the world was still moving. Occasionally, a hawk would circle high above, or a rabbit would dart across the grass. These small signs of life were comforting, even though they didn't bring her immediate help. As the afternoon wore on, Aeon began to realize that she might have to survive the night here if no one came. The thought filled her with fear. Nights on the plains were cold and unforgiving. Temperatures could drop drastically, and the darkness was full of unknown dangers. She tried to find a small depression in the ground where she could rest more safely, keeping her broken leg still. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the heat of the day. The wind had shifted, carrying the sounds of distant animals, coyotes howling far away, rustling in the brush. Each sound made her pulse quicken, a reminder of her vulnerability. She thought of her people again, the Apache, who had always lived close to the land. They knew its dangers and had learned how to navigate it safely. Aeon had grown up with their teachings, learning how to track, hunt, and survive. Yet here she was, still injured and alone, facing a challenge that could not be solved by skill alone. She began to understand that even the strongest, wisest people sometimes needed the help of others. No matter how independent she had been, no amount of preparation could replace the chance encounter with someone willing to help. As the hours passed, Aeon noticed subtle changes in the light and shadows. She tried to keep her mind occupied, focusing on details. The way the wind moved through the grass, the patterns of clouds above the distant hills. These small observations kept her mind sharp and helped her avoid giving in completely to fear. She whispered to herself, small words of encouragement, reminding herself that she had survived difficulties before and could survive this one. She repeated her own name quietly, a strange but comforting ritual. Aeon, stay strong, stay calm. She also thought about her horse again. Luma had stayed close, never wandering too far. Aeon realized how much she relied on the mare, not just for physical support, but for companionship. The quiet presence of the animal helped her keep her hope alive. She stroked Luma's neck gently, speaking softly. "We will get through this," she whispered, hoping that her own courage would be enough to carry them both through the waiting hours. By late afternoon, Aeon began to feel exhaustion more keenly. She had not eaten and her thirst was growing. The sun's position had shifted, casting long shadows and cooling the air slightly, but the pain in her leg made even small movements unbearable. She tried to shift slightly to ease the pressure, but each attempt brought sharp jolts of agony. Tears pricked her eyes, not just from pain but from the frustration of being trapped, unable to move freely as she had done her entire life. And then, as the sun moved closer to the horizon, something changed. In the distance, Aeon saw a faint figure moving along the trail. At first, she thought it might be a mirage, her mind playing tricks on her in the heat and exhaustion. But as the figure came closer, she realized it was real, a person, walking steadily across the plains. Her heart leapt with a mixture of hope and fear. She tried to call out, her voice cracking as she shouted, but her strength was limited. Still, she waved her arms as best she could, hoping to attract attention. The figure slowed, noticing her. It was a man, a solitary farmer who had been tending land nearby. He had seen her fall from a distance but had hesitated, unsure whether it was safe to approach a stranger. Now, seeing her signaling, he began moving more quickly, concern evident in his posture. Aeon felt a surge of relief and gratitude. Someone had come. Someone would help her. The loneliness and fear of the day began to lift slightly, replaced by hope that she could survive this ordeal. As the man approached, Aeon noticed small details about him, his worn clothes, the dirt-stained boots, and the careful, deliberate way he walked. He carried a bag, likely with tools and supplies for his farm. His eyes were alert, scanning the ground as he moved. Aeon could sense his cautious nature, his awareness of the open plains and the potential dangers. Yet he continued toward her, driven by a sense of responsibility and compassion. The distance between them closed, and Aeon felt her pulse quicken with both excitement and nervous anticipation. Finally, the man reached her side. He knelt carefully beside her, his expression a mix of concern and determination. "Are you hurt badly?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. Aeon tried to answer, but the words were weak and strained. She simply nodded, pointing to her leg. He examined it carefully, speaking softly to reassure her. "We'll get you fixed up," he said. "You won't be alone anymore." The sound of his voice, calm and certain, gave Aeon a warmth she hadn't felt all day. Relief washed over her, mingling with gratitude. Even though the journey to safety was not yet complete, Aeon knew that this moment was a turning point. Someone had come to help her, someone willing to risk traveling across the plains to reach her. She closed her eyes briefly, letting herself feel the hope and reassurance she had been craving. The lonely plains had felt endless and dangerous for hours, but now, with another human nearby, the vastness seemed less intimidating. Help had arrived, and survival was no longer just a distant hope. The farmer knelt beside Aeon, carefully examining her leg. He was a tall man with strong, broad shoulders and hands roughened by years of hard work on his land. His face was kind but serious, eyes scanning the broken terrain and then returning to her injuries. He spoke softly, "Don't try to move it. We'll get you to safety slowly." His calm voice was a relief to Aeon, who had spent so many hours alone, unsure if help would ever come. She tried to nod, her face wet with sweat and dust, grateful that someone had finally arrived. He glanced around, noting the best path to move her without causing more pain. The plains stretched in every direction, but nearby, there was a small rise where the ground was flatter and firmer. He decided to drag her gently toward that spot first. Carefully, he lifted her torso, supporting her weight without jostling her broken leg. Aeon bit her lip to keep from crying out, her teeth clenched against the sharp pain that shot through her leg. Luma, her horse, stayed close, watching with wide, nervous eyes, occasionally letting out soft whinnies as if to offer encouragement. Step by slow step, the farmer moved Aeon across the uneven ground. The sun had started to lower, casting long shadows over the plains and turning the sky a pale orange. The air was cooling, and the wind that had felt harsh earlier now carried a faint sweetness, the smell of wildflowers from nearby. Every so often, he would pause to adjust how he was holding her, making sure he did not hurt her further. Aeon could feel the exhaustion in her arms and legs, the ache in her back from lying on the ground, and the continued throbbing in her leg. Yet despite the pain, she felt a growing sense of relief. She was no longer alone. "Almost there," the farmer said gently. His voice was steady and reassuring, and for the first time in many hours, Aeon began to believe that she might actually make it through this ordeal. She glanced at him, noticing the careful way he moved, the patience in every gesture. Unlike the panic she had felt earlier, this man's presence brought a strange but welcome sense of calm. She realized that kindness was not just in words, it was in actions, in careful, deliberate movements that showed thoughtfulness and care. When they reached the small rise, the farmer set her down gently on a patch of soft grass. She winced at the movement but managed a small nod of thanks. "We need to keep your leg still," he said. From his bag, he pulled a piece of sturdy cloth and some rope. "We'll make a splint for your leg. It will help keep it steady until we can get better care." His hands worked skillfully, folding the cloth around her leg and tying it in place, creating a simple but strong support. Aeon felt the pain lessen slightly as the leg was stabilized. As he worked, he spoke quietly, trying to keep her mind off the pain. "You were very brave, riding alone across these plains," he said. "Not many people could have done what you did." Aeon listened, her breathing slowly evening out. She realized that talking, even in small words, helped her focus and kept her spirits from sinking. "I thank you," she said softly. Her voice was still weak, but the words carried deep gratitude. The farmer smiled faintly, his eyes warm. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "We still have to get you home safely." Once her leg was secured, he began planning their next move. There was a small cabin nearby, not far from where he lived, that could offer shelter for the night. It was a simple structure, but it would protect her from the coming darkness and the cold night air. Moving her again would be tricky, but he had done this before in emergencies. With care, he adjusted her position, making sure she was as comfortable as possible. Luma followed closely, and Aeon reached out to touch the mare's neck, finding a small comfort in the familiar warmth. The journey to the cabin was slow. The farmer carried Aeon in a sitting position, supporting her weight carefully, step by careful step. The plains seemed endless, stretching out on either side, but now the landscape felt less intimidating. Every so often, he would look down at her, checking to make sure she was okay, and Aeon would offer a faint smile in return. Even though the pain was still there, the human connection, the presence of someone willing to help, made the difficulty easier to bear. As they walked, Aeon began to notice more about the farmer. He was quiet for the most part, speaking only when necessary, but when he did, it was with thoughtfulness. He asked her gentle questions, learning her name, where she was from, and how long she had been traveling alone. She answered softly, grateful for his patience and for the distraction from her pain. His kindness was quiet, steady, and powerful in a way that made her feel safe. The cabin came into view as the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the plains in shades of gold and pink. It was small, made of rough-hewn logs, but solid and welcoming. The farmer opened the door, helping Aeon inside carefully. He laid her down on a simple cot, covering her with a blanket. The warmth of the cabin, along with the safety it offered, made her feel like the weight of the day was finally lifting. For the first time since her fall, she allowed herself to breathe fully, relaxing slightly. "Try to rest now," the farmer said. "You've been through a lot today, and your body needs time to heal." Aeon nodded, closing her eyes, though sleep was difficult with the pain in her leg. The farmer moved quietly, tending to small tasks around the cabin, lighting a fire, preparing a simple drink of water, and making sure everything was ready for the night. His care was gentle and deliberate, showing respect for her discomfort and her situation. As the evening wore on, Aeon's fear and exhaustion began to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of gratitude. She thought about how alone she had felt, how endless the plains had seemed, and how hopeless the situation appeared at first. And now in this small, simple cabin, she realized how much difference a single person could make. The farmer's presence, his patience, and his kindness had transformed her fear into hope. She felt a small smile form despite the pain. They sat quietly together, the fire casting soft shadows across the room. Aeon watched the flames dance, listening to the faint crackle of burning wood. The farmer glanced at her occasionally, offering words of reassurance when needed. She felt a growing sense of trust, a sense that she was in safe hands. The journey across the plains, the fall, the hours of waiting, all of it had led to this moment of relief. She realized that courage was not just in facing danger alone, but in accepting help when it was offered. Night fell over the plains, bringing cool air and darkness that made the cabin feel even more like a sanctuary. Outside, the wind whispered through the grass, and distant sounds of wildlife filled the quiet night. Inside, Aeon rested as best she could, the splint on her leg keeping it steady. The farmer stayed nearby, tending the fire and making sure she was comfortable. Though she had been scared and alone for so long, she now felt a sense of safety and protection that allowed her to relax. For hours, she thought about the day's events, the ride, the fall, the hours of waiting, and finally, the appearance of the farmer. It had been exhausting, painful, and frightening, but it had also shown her the power of kindness and the importance of human connection. Even in the harshest, loneliest places, help could appear when least expected. Aeon closed her eyes fully this time, allowing herself to rest. The plains outside remained vast and wild, but inside the cabin she felt warmth, safety, and hope. And as sleep finally came, she thought about the journey ahead. Her leg would need time to heal, and she would have to rely on this kind stranger for help. But for now, she allowed herself to simply rest, to feel the gentle presence of someone who had cared enough to come to her aid. Tomorrow the journey would continue, but tonight she was safe, and that was enough. The first light of dawn crept through the small window of the cabin, painting the wooden walls with soft orange and gold hues. Aeon stirred slowly, the ache in her leg reminding her that she had been injured. Despite the discomfort, there was a quiet comfort in waking to a warm, safe space. She shifted slightly, careful not to disturb the splint the farmer had made. Luma, her loyal horse, was resting just outside the cabin, ears flicking as she watched the world awaken. The sound of birds calling in the morning air reminded Aeon that life went on outside, in the vast plains she had traveled alone only a day before. The farmer was already awake, tending the fire and preparing a simple breakfast. His movements were careful, quiet, and deliberate, a reflection of someone who had learned patience through years of hard work. He noticed Aeon stirring and gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Good morning," he said gently. "You slept well, I hope?" Aeon tried to respond, managing a faint nod. Her throat felt dry and her stomach growled softly, reminding her that she had not eaten in many hours. He prepared a small meal of bread, dried meat, and warm water. Though it was simple, it was nourishing, and the smell alone was enough to lift Aeon's spirits. She ate slowly, careful not to upset her stomach or strain her leg. The farmer sat nearby, keeping an eye on her, speaking in a calm voice to make her feel at ease. "You've been through a lot," he said. "We'll take it slow today. There's no rush. You need time to heal." His words were kind, but they also carried the weight of experience, someone who understood the importance of care and patience. After breakfast, the farmer helped Aeon to a small chair in the cabin. He explained that her leg would take time to recover, and that she must not put weight on it too soon. He removed the temporary splint and replaced it with a slightly stronger one, using sticks and cloth in a careful pattern to keep her leg steady. Aeon felt a mixture of relief and gratitude. The pain was still there, but the steady, gentle care of this stranger made it bearable. She realized how much she had taken her independence for granted. She had always been capable and confident, yet this injury reminded her that sometimes everyone needs help. As the morning passed, Aeon noticed small details about the farmer that she hadn't before. His hands were strong but gentle, the kind of hands that had worked the soil for years and yet could handle delicate tasks with care. His face, lined slightly from the sun and wind, held a calm determination. There was a quiet dignity in the way he moved, a respect for life and for the people around him. Aeon found herself admiring him quietly, not just for the help he was giving her, but for the way he carried himself in the world. The farmer, noticing her curiosity, spoke softly about his life. He had lived alone for many years, working his small farm on the edge of the plains. He had grown accustomed to solitude, yet he seemed to possess a quiet wisdom born of observation and patience. He told her about the challenges of living on the plains, about sudden storms, dry seasons, and how every living thing had to adapt to survive. Aeon listened, fascinated. His stories painted a picture of the land that was both harsh and beautiful, full of lessons about resilience and care. Over the next few days, Aeon's leg began to heal slowly. The farmer helped her move from the chair to the cot, and back again, always supporting her carefully. He prepared meals and tended to the fire, ensuring that she had everything she needed. Luma stayed nearby, a silent companion, sensing her owner's weakened state and offering gentle comfort. The routine was simple but comforting. Aeon realized that in these quiet, ordinary moments, trust and connection were growing. She felt a sense of safety she had not known in hours, even days, of riding alone across the plains. Aeon began to talk more openly with the farmer. She told him about her tribe, the lessons she had learned from her elders, and the skills that had allowed her to ride safely across the dangerous plains. The farmer listened patiently, asking questions that showed his genuine interest. He shared small stories of his own life, about the crops he had planted, the storms he had weathered, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing a small seed grow into something strong. Their conversations were slow and gentle, building a bridge between two very different lives. One evening, as the sun set and the cabin glowed in warm amber light, Aeon realized just how much she appreciated this quiet companionship. She had been terrified and alone, hurt and vulnerable, yet now she felt a sense of belonging she had never expected. The farmer had given her more than physical care. He had given her hope, comfort, and the reassurance that she was not truly alone in the world. She glanced at him as he adjusted the firewood, and for a moment their eyes met. There was a quiet understanding, a shared recognition of the kindness and trust between them. Time moved gently in the cabin. Days passed with careful routines. Meals prepared, leg tended, small conversations exchanged. Aeon began to regain her strength, though she still could not walk without help. The farmer encouraged her to move slowly, supporting her as she practiced small steps around the cabin. Each movement was cautious, careful, and filled with small victories. With every step, she felt more capable, more alive, and more connected to this stranger who had risked his safety to help her. The bond between them grew in subtle ways. He would notice when she was uncomfortable and adjust her position without being asked. She would find small ways to express her gratitude, offering simple smiles, quiet words, or gentle touches. Neither rushed the other. There was no need. The silence itself was comfortable, a quiet companionship that did not require constant conversation. They were two people from very different worlds, brought together by chance, yet discovering the quiet joy of mutual care and understanding. One afternoon, Aeon managed to sit on a small stool while the farmer helped her adjust the splint on her leg. She looked at him with a small smile. "I don't know how I could have made it without you," she said softly. He shrugged slightly, a faint smile on his face. "We all need help sometimes," he replied. "Even the strongest people." His words were simple, yet they carried a depth of meaning. Aeon felt a warmth in her chest, not just gratitude, but a growing sense of admiration and respect for this man who had entered her life when she needed him most. Outside, the plains stretched endlessly, a reminder of the vast world beyond the cabin walls. Yet inside, Aeon felt a small world of safety, care, and quiet connection. The farmer's presence had turned a frightening experience into a lesson about trust, kindness, and the human capacity to care for one another. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, realizing that courage was not just in facing danger alone, but in allowing oneself to accept help, to trust, and to rely on another human being. As the days passed, Aeon's leg grew stronger. She could now lean on a walking stick, moving slowly around the cabin, each step a small victory. The farmer encouraged her gently, never pushing too hard, always aware of her limits. She marveled at his patience, at the way he balanced care with encouragement, and at the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him. The cabin had become a place of healing, not just for her leg, but for her spirit. Night fell again, cool and quiet, and Aeon sat by the fire, watching the flames dance. She thought of the plains outside, of the journey that had led her here, and of the unexpected kindness of a stranger. The farmer moved quietly around the cabin, tending the fire and preparing a small meal. Aeon felt a sense of peace she had not known in hours of wandering alone. She realized that human connection, patience, and quiet care could be just as powerful as courage and skill. In the vastness of the plains, she had found something even more valuable: trust, safety, and a friend who would stand by her when she needed it most. The days passed gently, and Aeon's leg grew stronger with each careful step she took. What had started as unbearable pain was now manageable, thanks to the farmer's constant care and attention. He helped her practice walking slowly around the cabin, supporting her as she tested the strength in her leg. Each small movement was a victory, a sign that her body was healing and that she would soon be able to travel again. The farmer never rushed her. His patience was steady, his encouragement quiet but firm, giving her confidence that she could recover fully. Aeon began to reflect on her journey. She remembered the moment she had fallen, the long hours of fear and waiting, and the relief she had felt when the farmer appeared. That day had been terrifying, yet it had also revealed something unexpected: the kindness and generosity that could exist even in the most lonely and dangerous places. She realized that she had always valued strength and independence, but now she understood that accepting help was not a sign of weakness. It was a form of courage. Over the days of recovery, Aeon and the farmer shared more of their lives with one another. She spoke of her tribe, their customs, and the lessons she had learned from the elders. She described the vast plains she had grown up on, the trails she had ridden, and the connection she felt with the land. The farmer listened attentively, his eyes bright with interest. In return, he told her more about his life on the farm, about the quiet satisfaction of tending to the land and animals, and about the challenges of living alone. Their conversations were simple, yet they built a deep bond, a bridge between two very different worlds. Aeon grew stronger each day, able to stand without support for a few moments, then take short steps around the cabin. Luma, her loyal horse, became her companion again, nudging her gently and whinnying as if encouraging her progress. The plains outside seemed less frightening now and more like a place of possibility. Aeon felt a renewed sense of confidence. She had faced fear, endured pain, and learned patience. She understood the value of trust and kindness, and the importance of human connection in moments of vulnerability. As her strength returned, Aeon knew it was time to return to her tribe. She had responsibilities and loved ones waiting for her, and though she was grateful for the farmer's care, she could not stay indefinitely. The farmer helped her prepare for the journey, ensuring her leg was secure and her supplies ready. Luma was saddled and ready, and the familiar bond between horse and rider offered her comfort. Aeon looked at the farmer with deep gratitude, her eyes shining. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "For everything. I could not have survived without you." The farmer smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting quiet pride and warmth. "You were brave," he said. "You would have found a way, but I am glad I could help. Take care, Aeon. Travel safely, and remember that sometimes, even the strongest people need a hand." His words were simple, yet they carried the weight of understanding and care. Aeon nodded, feeling a deep connection to this man who had risked time and effort to help a stranger in need. She mounted Luma carefully, testing the leg as she settled in the saddle. The journey back to her tribe began slowly. Aeon moved carefully, guided by Luma's steady steps and the confidence she had regained in her own body. The plains, once a place of fear and isolation, now seemed alive with possibilities. She noticed the beauty in the landscape more than ever. The way the morning sun painted golden patterns on the grass, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the distant hills rising like guardians over the land. Each detail reminded her of the resilience she had discovered within herself. Along the way, Aeon reflected on the farmer's kindness. It was not just the help he had given her, but the way he had treated her with respect, patience, and dignity. In those quiet days of recovery, she had learned that true courage was not only in facing danger alone, but in allowing oneself to trust and accept care when needed. She felt a quiet gratitude that would stay with her for the rest of her life, a memory of the day a stranger had become a friend when she needed it most. When she reached the outskirts of her tribe's settlement, her heart swelled with joy. Families were busy with daily tasks. Children played in the open spaces, and elders tended to the community's needs. Seeing familiar faces and hearing friendly voices reminded Aeon of the strong bonds that connected her to her people. She was greeted with concern and relief, questions about her fall and how she had managed to survive. Aeon smiled gently, her voice calm and strong. "I had help," she said simply. "A kind farmer cared for me until I could walk again." Her story spread quickly through the village, inspiring admiration and gratitude. The elders nodded wisely, acknowledging the courage and patience Aeon had shown, both in surviving the fall and in trusting the stranger who had helped her. Her younger siblings crowded around her, asking questions and listening with wide eyes as she recounted the experience, careful to emphasize the importance of courage, patience, and gratitude. Even though the plains had seemed endless and dangerous, Aeon had returned with stories of human kindness and resilience. In the days that followed, Aeon resumed her daily routines with her tribe. She could ride again, although cautiously, and her leg continued to strengthen. Yet she carried the lessons of her experience with her. She had learned that courage and independence were important, but so too were trust, patience, and the willingness to accept help. The memory of the farmer's steady presence and careful kindness became a part of her story, a reminder that even in the harshest moments, compassion and human connection could shine through. Though she returned to her tribe, Aeon never forgot the farmer. She thought of him often, remembering his quiet strength, his patience, and the care he had given her. She knew that their lives were separate, worlds apart, yet the bond they had formed would always remain in her heart. She spoke to others about him, not just as the man who had saved her, but as an example of how a single act of kindness could change someone's life forever. Aelne's journey had begun as a dangerous ride across the plains, filled with uncertainty and fear. She had fallen, suffered, and faced the loneliness of the wild. Yet it ended with healing, connection, and a renewed understanding of human compassion. She had experienced the best of both worlds, the wild freedom of the plains and the quiet, steady kindness of a person willing to help when it mattered most. Her life would never be the same, shaped forever by the lessons of courage, patience, and gratitude she had learned in those long hours on the plains. Years later, Aelne would recount the story to her children and grandchildren. She would describe the plains, the fall, and the fear that had seemed overwhelming at the time. But she would also tell them about the farmer, the man who had come when she was most vulnerable, who had tended to her with patience, and who had taught her the value of kindness. It was a story of survival, yes, but more than that, it was a story of human connection, trust, and the unexpected ways lives could intersect to create lasting bonds. And though the plains remained vast and wild, Aelne no longer feared them alone. She carried the memory of the farmer with her, a reminder that even in the most lonely and dangerous moments, someone could appear with help, care, and compassion. That lesson stayed with her for the rest of her life, guiding her actions and shaping her spirit. Aelne had survived the fall, healed her body, and learned the profound strength of human kindness, a strength as enduring as the plains themselves.